The mysterious delivery.
My name's Nick, and I used to work as a delivery driver. It was just another ordinary evening. Orders, customers, roads. But one delivery that night still haunts me. It was around 10 p.m. when I got a new order notification. The address was a house on the outskirts of town. I called the customer to confirm the details, but no one answered. Nothing unusual. That happens sometimes. The road led to a nearly abandoned street. The streetlights didn't work, and the old trees cast strange shadows on the cracked pavement. When I arrived at the address, the house was completely dark. No lights. I decided to call again. The phone rang and rang, but there was no answer. There was an old doorbell on the porch. When I pressed it, I heard a faint mechanical buzz, but there was no movement inside. I knocked on the door. Silence. Only the wind whistled through the branches. I was about to leave when I heard a rustling noise. It came from the backyard, like someone or something moving. "Hey, it's the delivery guy. Your order's here," I called out, trying to sound calm. The rustling stopped. Then, silence again. A chill ran down my spine. I didn't want to stick around, but the instructions said to leave the package by the door if the customer didn't respond. I placed the package on the porch and stepped back. Suddenly, I heard the door creak. It opened just a few inches, but it was enough to make my chest tighten. "Your order's delivered," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The door stayed still. In the darkness beyond, I couldn't see anything but blackness. I didn't wait long. I turned and headed back to my car. As I got in and started the engine, my eyes drifted to the rearview mirror. In the yard of the house stood a figure. Tall, motionless, blending almost completely with the shadows. I hadn't seen it before. It had just appeared out of nowhere. My heart pounded as I slammed on the gas, not caring if anything was in my way. When I got back to the office and told my coworkers, they just laughed it off. But the next morning, when I opened the app to check the order history, I noticed something strange. The address I'd gone to wasn't on the map anymore. There was no record of that delivery in the system. Someone told me later that the house at that location had been abandoned for years, with no one living there. Now I can't stop wondering, if it wasn't a real delivery, who opened the door that night?
The Vanishing Things.
A young couple, Emily and James, had just moved into a new home on the outskirts of town. It was their first place together, and they were filled with excitement and joy. The house was old but charming, 2 stories with a small garden in front, giving it a cozy, peaceful feel. The first few days went smoothly. They unpacked boxes, setting up their new home together. But soon, strange things began to happen. At first, everything seemed normal. But one day, when Emily went into her room, she noticed that her favorite watch was missing. She was sure she had left it on the shelf by the bed, but now it was nowhere to be found. At first, she thought maybe she had just misplaced it, but when the watch reappeared on a different shelf in another room, unease started to set in. "Did you see my watch?" she asked James. He replied that he hadn't touched it and hadn't even noticed it was gone. The next day, she noticed something else odd. Late at night, in the kitchen, one of the knives was missing from the counter. They searched the entire house, but the knife was gone. This was starting to feel less like a coincidence. "This is crazy," James said, trying to brush it off. But later that night, he saw something even stranger. As they were sitting in the living room watching TV, James noticed something was off. The photo that used to be on the table was now replaced with an unknown book, a book neither of them had ever seen before. "Emily, did you put this book here?" he asked, picking it up. She looked at him, confused. "I never bought that book, James." From that point on, more and more odd things started to happen. Their belongings, Things they were sure they'd left in one place kept changing spots. Keys, papers, clothes, everything would disappear and reappear in completely different places. The next morning, they decided to visit their neighbors to find out more about the previous owners. They learned that the house had been empty for years, and nothing like this had ever happened before. The couple decided to set up cameras to see what was going on. When they watched the footage, they saw something chilling. In the dead of night, when the house was quiet, a figure appeared in one of the rooms. It was an old woman, moving through the house as though she belonged there. She rearranged their things, placing them back where they thought they'd left them. Shocked, they turned to the local police. When the officers searched the house, they found that the previous owners had tragically died in a mysterious fire, and the woman was likely their mother, who had never left the house, even in death. After the couple moved out, their things stopped disappearing, but they still often remember the fear they felt in that house, where nothing was ever where it was supposed to be.
Joke or threat?
This happened a few months ago when Lena and her husband moved into a new house on the outskirts of the city. At first, everything was great, new neighborhood, new neighbors, but over time, strange things began to happen. One morning, Lena went outside and saw a dead mouse on her lawn. The next morning, it was even worse. A dead bird was found. Then came an old torn doll that appeared on their doorstep. Lena didn't think much of it until her husband began to search for an explanation. Maybe it's just some kids acting out, he suggested. But Lena knew this wasn't child's play. She felt that something more was involved. A week later, the situation worsened. During the day, their yard was splattered with paint, and someone had written threatening words on the walls of the house. Lena began to fear that something serious was going on. The next day, when they returned home, the doors to their garage were open, although they always kept them locked. Inside, there were strange, torn items, as if someone had been searching for something. Lena realized this was more than just some inexplicable pranks. Eventually, Lena decided to take action. She installed security cameras around the house to figure out who was behind all of this. It turned out that these events were not random at all. When they reviewed the footage, they saw a man hiding in their yard, throwing dead animals and old dolls there. He was trying to scare them into leaving the house. The police quickly responded to the footage, and the man was caught. His name was Robert, and he was Lena and her husband's neighbor. His motives remained a mystery, but catching him was enough to bring peace back to their home. From conversations with the police, they learned that Robert had long-standing conflicts with other neighbors and had decided to get back at them for not liking him. Lena and her husband were shocked, but also relieved that they no longer felt unsafe. Since then, they became more cautious of their surroundings, always checking the yard before stepping outside. And though they had solved the mystery, the memories of those strange events still linger, reminding them of that unsettling time in their lives.